Hi everyone. In today's lecture, we're going to be talking about diversity. So on this side, I just wanted to acknowledge that diversity exists and share a little bit about the statistics. So this is just some of the statistics. The list goes on and on. But mostly wanted to recognize here that not only are children going to be diverse, but they are going to see the world from diverse perspectives, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And as an educator or a person working with young children and families, it really is your job to address your own biases, as well as acknowledge, respect, and educate yourself on diverse backgrounds of the children that you are working with, as well as their families, and create learning environments that are going to support and recognize and include all walks of life of human beings and create opportunities for diversity to be appreciated and emphasized in your space. So as I was mentioning on the previous slide, biases. So let's talk about them and let's think about how to address your own biases, because biases exist in our world, and if we are paying attention and acknowledge that bias and diversity exist in the same space and setting, we're better able to address our own biases and work towards creating an anti-bias education. And it's important to check in with yourself, especially when you are working with children and families, and just in general when we're working with people in our personal lives and our professional lives and just out and about in the world. We are all different and diverse, and so acknowledging our own biases and having recognition of diverse human beings helps us to better understand how we can create spaces that are appreciative and well versed in all of the different aspects that diversity can bring forth. And we see that children begin to categorize themselves into groups, and it's natural to want to look at yourself and then look at a group of other people and start to categorize differences in what we might see and how we behave and how we are existing in the world. There are many differences in human beings, and so this is a very common natural human experience to explore our differences and try and figure out who we are and who other people are in the world. But unfortunately, there is something called in-group bias, which is an inborn human tendency to favor people who are like you. And so this can be related to the way that we look, the way that we speak in different languages, the way that we are growing up in different spaces, the kinds of jobs that we have, the type of education that we might have, the kinds of activities that we like to do. So we're categorizing ourselves and favorizing the people that are similar to us. And unfortunately, without even realizing it, this can sometimes lead to treating other people who are in different types of groups than us poorly, and discrimination can easily occur. And so we are giving all of our attention, our love, our effort, our kindness, and our existence to people who are just like us in our work settings, in our home lives, in our friend groups. And then unfortunately, this can lead to discrimination and treating people in other groups that are outside of our own personal circles unfairly and poorly. And we may not even realize this because, again, we're busy in our own groups. So thinking about this in-group bias, it is a natural human tendency. And there's a great quote here that I want to read for you. So in lieu of looking at how we might treat other groups poorly, ultimately many forms of discrimination and bias may develop not because outgroups are hated, but because positive emotions such as admiration, sympathy, and trust are reserved for the in-group. So that just solidifies that we are giving our all to the people who are like us and who we care for. And this is a great video clip that just talks about in-group bias and how it starts very, very early on. So I encourage you to watch this, and looking at how early imprinting into our human existence can help us to better understand our relationships with people and how we put ourselves into groups based on similar characteristics. Just continuing a little bit more about how bias exists, I want you to think of yourself. So you may or may not already work with children and families, but thinking about yourself as an educator and a professional in the world working with children and families, we are susceptible to in-group bias as well. And so I want you to watch this video by Jane Elliott. She did a fascinating experiment with her 3rd grade class, and this video shows how easily teachers can create an unfriendly and basically hostile environment based on information that they provide to children on their differences. Specifically, she's looking at eye color and categorizing groups of children based on their eye color and their attributes related to their smartness and who they are as individuals. And so in this video, her study examines how easily discrimination in a classroom can build based on the influence of another person. And so I know that this is a little bit of a longer video, but there are going to be some exam questions on the final related to this. So please watch this. It's extremely fascinating to see how easily this in-group bias can be added on to when we have influences of others and aspects of stereotyping. And then this graphic here on the right hand side looks at a little bit more about Walter Gilliam's interests and research in looking specifically at racial and gender biases, and he gave teachers an experiment and looked at eye tracking using eye tracking technology and asked them to look out for challenging behaviors in a classroom. And the study was done with boys and girls, specifically black boys, black girls, white girls, and white boys. And in the scenario, none of these students, regardless of their race and their gender, they were not exhibiting any challenging behaviors, but we were able to see, based on the eye tracking technology, that teachers of all races and backgrounds were more likely to track children of color and specifically black boys. And so it showed during this experiment that teachers were primed to have in-group and out-group biases related to race and gender, and they were expecting children to have certain behaviors in the classroom ahead of time without even getting to know the children or really getting to look at their behaviors in more detail. And so it just showed that overall the racial and gender biases were specifically targeting black boys, and overall boys were more likely to be tracked for challenging behaviors, even though they were not exhibiting any challenging behaviors. And so it's really interesting, and I want you to take a peek at that video, like I said. And if you're interested, I can provide more information on Walter Gilliam. I have a couple articles about that one as well. On this slide, I wanted to just share a little bit about some of the developmental milestone information that connects to diversity. And basically, we're just seeing that this is a process of categorization, and that categorization for young children is normal. We expect children to start to categorize shapes and colors and sizes and numbers and letters and all of that stuff related to mathematics and language and literacy, but we often shy away from helping children to categorize, acknowledge, and respect different aspects about human beings. And so we see that children around 3 years old are beginning to identify themselves into one or more groups based on tangible things. So the way that people look, the way that people sound, so based on skin color, languages. We even see for body size, often children categorize grown-ups in one category and children in another based on body size. And by around age 4, children are starting to have a better understanding of what these differences mean among people and starting to exhibit their own cultural identity more often, and they're curious about themselves and they're curious about other people. And this is a wonderful time to create opportunities for us to talk about differences and to talk about people in a variety of different contexts. But we also see that in-group biases, preferences for our own groups, are starting to become more apparent during this time, especially if there is not a wide variety of exposure for children in their spaces, in their classrooms, in their home lives, and they often are starting to differentiate people who are not like them. And so just referencing back to the Reject film that we talked about and how they emphasize the phrase, you can't say you can't play, we can create opportunities to talk about how there is unfairness in the world and how we need to create opportunities for children to be involved and for everyone to be able to play, and to acknowledge that yes, we may have differences, but we can still exist in a space where we have differences and we can still play with the same toys even though we might look different and sound different. And children around this age are also adhering to rules and fairness, so this is a great opportunity to emphasize and protect fairness around diversity in human beings. And then we just see that children around 5 or more strongly favoring their own group based on their cultural, ethnic, and racial identities. And so they're thinking about deeper friendships beyond just what they can tangibly see, but internally what makes people in their groups or out of their groups. So again, this is an ideal time to talk about diversity issues with children and recognizing different people in our world. On the next few slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about some subtopics that we might see for gender, race, culture, and social class. So on this slide, we're looking at gender specifically. So this is information that should be helpful to you as you work with young children and families, and acknowledging that around age 2, gender awareness starts to come forth and children are starting to acknowledge stereotypical behaviors and toy typing that's brought on by the rest of the world. So as adults and as media is present, we are the ones who are showing children stereotypical aspects about how girls should like pink and dolls and boys should like blue and trucks. And so we see that children are starting to point out in-group and out-group biases related to gender around 3, and that gender norms are strongly influenced by others around age 4. So again, ideal times to be talking about diversity issues specifically related to gender. So there's many different aspects of diversity, and we need to think about a wide range of how we can create opportunities to have open discussion. This also comes into play when we think about the classroom setup, the materials that we offer, the types of play that we are creating for children, and are we making steps to involve not only boys in our driving trucks and digging in the dirt, but girls as well. And same within our housekeeping area, is everybody getting the opportunity to participate in caring for the baby dolls and dressing up. So we need to make sure that we are emphasizing that there are a variety of different roles that we might step into and opportunities to play, and that the colors that we choose to like and the toys that we choose don't have any connection to who we are and what our gender says about us. On this slide, just a little bit more about racial awareness and thinking about around age 3 or 4. This is when children are starting to have an understanding about race and being able to apply specific labels around black and white. And we're able to see that children are commenting heavily on visual aspects about different people. And again, stereotypical ideas about the world related to people based on the color of their skin and what people are supposed to be doing, the expectations and the behaviors that we create around people are starting to be more emphasized. And so again, this is a key opportunity for you as an educator or teacher working with young children, is to recognize that we all may look different, but we can still all play, we can still all eat, we can still all take naps. So there are many ways to help to avoid discussing stereotypes. And this is a great video from CNN that talks about children's ideas about race. So I strongly encourage you to to watch this to learn a little bit more about racial awareness. All right, so on this slide, we're going to be talking about cultural awareness. So we know that people are different in many different ways, the things that they do, and this can include language, the types of foods that they eat, different clothing that people might wear, and also holidays that they might celebrate. So culture has many aspects, and we often see that when children are limited to the exposure of various cultures, they might start to think that cultures that differ from their own are atypical or not normal because they don't have exposure, they don't understand. And so this leads to stereotyping and prejudice when we don't have an understanding of differences, when we don't have enough experiences and exposure to differences. And we're often afraid because this area of the world and about people is unknown to us. And so we need to provide children with exposure and knowledge and provide more open and inclusive environments for children to learn about different cultures, to learn about different people in all aspects, whether it's culture, race, gender, socioeconomic status. All of these areas need to be strongly included and emphasized in our spaces, even if the children in your classroom don't represent other populations in the world. We still need to help them to be exposed to different aspects and elements of culture in the world around them. And so, unfortunately, we see that children in minority cultures can often emanate feelings of lower self-worth because of dominant culture ideas. And this is a great time to think beyond culture and really emphasizing that all children need to be included and recognized for their values, beliefs, and beauty that they bring into the world. And so we can emphasize this in the conversations that we have, the books that we read, the visual representation that we have in our materials and in our play spaces where we have books and pictures. So while we're sitting at the table for lunchtime talking about the different types of food that everyone is bringing in, reading books about different foods and clothing that people might wear, and talking about diverse aspects in people and what they look like and maybe the different languages that they speak and how they sound different, and that we all celebrate different holidays. So really bringing respect and appreciation to various cultures and acknowledging that not everyone in the classroom is going to share the same beliefs, and that's okay. And that's the beauty of what we bring into the world. And so this is also your opportunity as an educator with young children and families to have understanding, to create experiences for yourself, and to get rid of those fears and eliminate the biases that you have based on diverse aspects around cultural differences. And so you need to learn and educate yourself and be respectful and appreciate all of the different aspects that children can bring into the classroom so that you can become a better educator and build deeper connections, as well as help children to create connections with one another. On this slide, we're going to talk about social class. So again, just thinking about this aspect of diversity as a way to classify and categorize people. And so children start to have understandings of what currency looks like and rich versus poor, and how different people are going to be categorized based on wealth and poverty. And my mom shared an interesting story with me about a child in her classroom when she was a preschool teacher. And she had a little girl who, during cleanup time, said she did not have to clean up because in her family they had money and they paid for a maid to help clean up for them. And so she thought that it was everyone else's job to clean up for her. So just one perspective on the understanding of different types of wealth. And for her, she was wealthier than everyone else, and therefore everyone else needed to clean up after her. So just an interesting take on that, just one example. But we also see that children are starting to notice inequality, and this is again a great opportunity to talk about unfairness related to rich and poor. And so I encourage you again to check out this video where children discuss their thoughts on social class and what it means for the types of occupations that they expect to come with rich and poorness and wealth and poverty, and also what they deem as overall success in the work field. On this slide, I wanted to talk about multicultural education and thinking about how we can help children to learn about themselves and who they are and their family backgrounds, but also thinking about how through multicultural education, we help children to learn more about other people and recognize that even though people are different, there are many ways that we are the same. We all can create opportunities to respect and understand and recognize others and the world around them. And in addition to learning about diversity, we want children to learn about unfairness and that the way we treat people matters. So I'm sure we've all heard of the phrase, we need to treat people the way that we want to be treated. And so we do not want to hide or shun our differences, but embrace and be aware of them and acknowledge them and help children to avoid isms and avoid prejudice and practice kindness towards one another. And so this is a great article link from NAEYC and a quote that I want to read for you that says, "Anti-bias education is a way of teaching that helps children to learn to be proud of themselves and their families, respect a range of human differences, and recognize unfairness and bias, and speak up for the rights of others." And I think that that last piece right there is extremely key. We can speak up for the rights for others when we recognize and understand differences amongst us. So this is just an additional slide to, kind of recap what we've talked about. And recognizing that we know that children are aware of differences very early on from the moment, from the moment we're born. We're trying to make sense of all of the information in the world, including people, and that anti-bias behavior begins very early on, in-group and out-group biases, and if not checked, they're never going to be resolved or acknowledged. And children's educational experiences often differ based on diverse aspects, and unfortunately this can lead to negative outcomes related to bias. So this is a great video that talks about why multicultural education is needed and just how to implement this practice with young children. On this slide, I wanted to share a little bit about the benefits of multicultural education. So this goes back to that basic classification, categorization. It helps with this skill, and we know that this skill is important in not only recognizing diversity, but also with mathematics and science and reading, all of these different things that we want children to practice in school. Learning about differences and diversity helps with classification, and being able to notice differences and better understand diversity helps us to learn about similarities and differences and talk openly about them. And so this can decrease fears about people based on their differences and increase knowledge. And so we're not just avoiding conversations, we're directly head on talking about people and who they are and where they come from and what they look like, and learning and growing as a diverse group as we should. And children are often more diverse, children are more comfortable with people who are of diverse backgrounds when they have more understanding, when they have knowledge. And we can broaden children's personal experiences by creating opportunities to talk about differences and to share about experiences and to bring in different types of materials that emphasize diversity and looking beyond our own experiences, our own culture, our own racial and ethnic backgrounds, and our own ways of life, and bringing in multicultural education into the classrooms. On this slide, I wanted to share some ways that we can facilitate multicultural education. And so really the emphasis here is teaching children to appreciate differences and diversity in the world, and teaching them also about ways that we are all the same. We need to eat, we need to sleep, we need to love. We all need comfort and friendships and spaces where we can feel safe together, and we can explore commonalities amongst people, but also explore differences in these permutations of our commonalities. But the emphasis here is really to also actively address biases. And if you're noticing children engaging in treating children unkindly, unfairly, immediately addressing that. So maybe, for example, a child notices someone who has a disability and refers to them as a baby because this child is not able to potentially run or move in the same way as children typically of their age. And they have knowledge that lesser skills means that they could potentially be a baby because they've categorized this understanding of people around their world that babies do have skills that are lower than themselves if they're a preschooler or early elementary schooler. And so it's our job as an educator or a parent or whatever your role is to talk about how, yes, we all have different types of skills, and recognizing that this child is not a baby, they're actually the same age, but we have different types of skills, and then acknowledging what types of skills the child does have. So maybe they're not able to run or walk at the same speed as the children in the classroom, but maybe they're able to wiggle their bodies and they're able to scrunch their noses, or they're able to yell really loud, or they're able to roll a ball back and forth to you and throw it. So many different ways that we can then promote the skills that this child does have, and open discussion about how, yes, we all have different types of skills. We all come from different places and different backgrounds. And so really taking this opportunity to emphasize that even though we might have different skills, this is okay. And again, going back to that, you can't say you can't play. So really making emphasis on, we need to treat people fairly. We need to treat people kindly. We need to do our best to include everybody. And we need to also help find ways to create opportunities to learn about children and their families beyond just the context of the classroom and what we know and feel comfortable with. So asking families to share more about themselves so we can learn and grow and bring in diverse aspects into the classroom space from their home lives. And it's wonderful that we live in California because there is much diversity amongst our state. And this video helps to look more about being thoughtful in multicultural and anti-bias education and how it can be implemented, and really just thinking about treating others with kindness and helping children to feel good about themselves, and really just treating others the way that we want to be treated. So I hope you enjoyed today's lecture, and have a wonderful day or evening whenever you're watching this, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye, everyone.